Volk ist wieder stark geworden in seinem Geiste.
In German medieval Nuremberg, the marching, seething squash of Adolf Hitler's Nazi Congress comes to an end.
What if I told you that Adolf Hitler's absence might not have saved the world from devastation, but instead created an entirely different chaos? That the Holocaust, World War II, and even the global power dynamics we know today might have unfolded in even more unpredictable, perhaps sinister ways. This isn't just a question of morality or what if. It's a journey into the alternate paths of history, into a world where one man's rise, or lack of it, changes everything. Would humanity have thrived without Hitler, or would we have found ourselves trapped in another hellish reality? Buckle up, because this is going to challenge everything you think you know about the most infamous man in history. A Germany without Hitler, saved or still doomed? Was Hitler truly inevitable, or was he just the most terrifying symptom of a broken Germany? Post-World War I, Germany was on its knees. Humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, its economy shattered, its people desperate for hope. Hitler didn't invent this despair, he exploited it. So if there was no Hitler, does Germany escape its fate? Not necessarily. The same anger, the same thirst for revenge was bubbling in millions of Germans. The 1920s and 1930s were a time of extreme polarization, with the far right and far left battling for control of the political narrative. In this environment, it wasn't just possible, but likely, that another demagogue would have risen to prominence. Imagine someone like Ernst Röhm, the ambitious leader of the SA, Sturmabteilung, whose militant faction was responsible for much of the early Nazi Party's violent enforcement. Röhm's leadership might have steered Germany into militarization and authoritarianism, but perhaps without the same genocidal focus. And here's where it gets complicated. Without Hitler's unrelenting obsession with anti-Semitism and his idea of Lebensraum, living space for the Aryan race, Germany might have pursued a more practical nationalism. This could have involved expansionist policies aimed solely at restoring pre-World War I borders or consolidating economic power, rather than targeting entire populations for extermination. It raises the question, would a Germany led by another nationalist have been just as destructive on the world stage, but without the unique monstrosity of Hitler's racial war? But what if no demagogue emerged at all? Without Hitler's charisma and ability to unify the fractured right-wing factions under one banner, could Germany have instead fallen into prolonged chaos? The Weimar Republic was already on the brink of collapse, with extremists from both the communist and nationalist sides vying for control. A weaker Germany might have left the country vulnerable to external pressures, perhaps even intervention by neighboring powers like France or Britain. On the flip side, it's worth considering whether a Germany without Hitler could have stabilized under a democratic or moderate government. Without the radicalization of the Nazi Party, could figures like Gustav Stresemann have ushered in an era of recovery and cooperation? It's possible, but only if the economic devastation and political polarization were adequately addressed, which seems unlikely given the conditions of the time. And here's the real twist. Without Hitler's unrelenting push for war and genocide, would the Allies have allowed Germany to regain its strength peacefully? Or would they have imposed stricter sanctions, fearing a repeat of the militarism that led to World War I? Germany's path without Hitler might have been less bloody in the short term, but it could also have been a slower, more drawn-out struggle to reclaim its place in the world. Ultimately, while Hitler's absence might have changed the specific nature of Germany's trajectory, the underlying forces of nationalism, economic despair, and international humiliation suggest that Germany's fate would still have been tumultuous. The question isn't whether Germany would have avoided conflict, but rather what shape that conflict would have taken, and whether the absence of one man could have truly altered the tide of history. Would World War II have happened without him? Here's a bombshell. Hitler didn't start World War II alone. The world was a powder keg. Japan was on the rise, Italy was dreaming of empire, and the Soviet Union was waiting in the wings. Even without Hitler, would a global conflict have been inevitable? Maybe, but not the way you think. Without Hitler's aggressive invasion of Poland, the timeline for war could have shifted. Britain and France might have hesitated longer, or even allowed Germany to regain its power without confrontation. Could they have pursued a policy of appeasement indefinitely, avoiding war for years, but ultimately emboldening other powers like Japan and Italy to expand unchecked? Let's imagine a slower build-up to war. Japan, driven by its imperial ambitions and need for resources, still attacks China. But without a major European war to divert attention, the Allies might have focused their power in the Pacific. What happens to Japan's dreams of dominating Asia if the United States and Britain join forces earlier? Could Japan have been contained before Pearl Harbor, preventing the escalation of conflict in the Pacific entirely?
Auch diese Stadt mit ihren Menschen gehört zu diesem Volkstum. Sie ist deutsch und bleibt deutsch.
Then there's the Soviet Union. Hitler's invasion of Poland and subsequent attack on the USSR forced Stalin to react defensively. Without Hitler's aggressions, might Stalin have pursued his own expansionist agenda unchecked, potentially triggering a different kind of European conflict? Imagine a Cold War beginning a decade earlier, not between capitalism and communism, but between an unopposed Soviet bloc and an uncertain Europe.
Während die Bevölkerung Danzigs ruhig und vertrauensvoll die Heimkehr ins Reich erwartet, sind die Volksdeutschen innerhalb der polnischen Grenzen wildestem Terror ausgesetzt. Viele Tausende flüchteten vor den Gewalttätigkeiten der Polen.
Consider also the balance of power in Europe without Hitler's war machine. Italy's Mussolini might have been emboldened to expand further into Africa and the Mediterranean. Japan, seeing no distraction from the Western powers, could have focused its ambitions on Southeast Asia, leading to early and perhaps more widespread resistance from colonial powers. And what of the United States? Without a European war and the attack on Pearl Harbor, it's unlikely the US would have emerged as the global superpower we know today. Its economy, still struggling in the shadow of the Great Depression, might not have experienced the wartime boom that catapulted it to dominance. Would a more isolationist US have allowed the world's conflicts to simmer longer, or would it have stepped in as a reluctant global peacekeeper? Without Hitler's direct provocations, World War II might have been delayed, redirected, or entirely reshaped into a series of smaller regional conflicts. But make no mistake, a world without Hitler does not mean a world without war. It might just have been a world with different players and an entirely new kind of chaos. The US, still a superpower, or left in the shadows? The United States as a global superpower owes much of its dominance to World War II. It was the war machine that pulled America out of the Great Depression and catapulted it into global leadership. But in a world without Hitler, does America stay an isolated giant, reluctant to step onto the world stage? Think about this. No Pearl Harbor, no D-Day, no Marshall Plan. Without the war, there's no sudden economic boom, no rapid technological advancement. America's industrial capacity, which became a juggernaut during the war years, might never have reached its full potential. Without the massive mobilization for war, how would industries like aviation, automobiles, and electronics have developed? Would America's economy have remained stagnant longer, leaving room for other nations, perhaps even the Soviet Union or an industrialized Japan, to claim dominance? And what about America's cultural identity? The war didn't just unify the country, it reshaped it. Without the shared sacrifice of World War II, would the US have become the melting pot of national pride and global ambition that it is today? Would the civil rights movement have gained traction as quickly without the war's exposure of deep hypocrisies in the fight for freedom abroad while denying it at home? It's a chilling thought. Without World War II, America might never have stepped fully into its role as the world's leader, and the world we know today could be far less stable as a result. The Holocaust, prevented or delayed? The Holocaust, a tragedy so tied to Hitler's name that imagining its absence feels like a relief. But here's the haunting question. Without Hitler, does anti-Semitism simply take another form somewhere else? Let's not forget, hatred of Jews wasn't unique to Hitler or Germany. Anti-Semitism was deeply ingrained across Europe, from the pogroms of Eastern Europe to the institutional discrimination in France, the UK, and beyond. In fact, in the 1930s, Jews faced prejudice even in the United States, where restrictive quotas in universities and professional fields were commonplace. The rise of fascism in countries like Italy and Spain also carried undertones of anti-Semitism, though never to the industrialized horror seen in Hitler's regime. So what happens without Hitler? Would another German leader, less fanatical but still anti-Semitic, have pursued policies of exclusion, segregation, or expulsion? While the Holocaust as we know it might not have happened, some historians argue that a smaller-scale tragedy could have unfolded, a slow, systematic stripping of rights rather than outright extermination. And if Germany didn't take the lead in this hatred, could another nation, emboldened by unchecked prejudice, have filled the void? And what about Israel? The creation of the Jewish state was heavily influenced by the Holocaust, as the world sought to provide a refuge for Jews after witnessing the horrors of Nazi extermination. Without Hitler's campaign of annihilation, does the state of Israel exist today, or does the absence of the Holocaust delay or derail the Zionist movement, leaving Jewish communities scattered and vulnerable across Europe and the Middle East?
I had nightmares, of course, for I would say for a couple of months. You know, waking up thinking that I'm still in the camps.
In the end, removing Hitler from history may spare us from the Holocaust, but it doesn't erase the conditions that allowed such hatred to fester. It forces us to question not just the man, but the world that enabled him, a world that might have found new ways to express the same evils without him. Historians weigh in a controversial debate.
Grew from 100,000 at the beginning of the war to 158,000 in 1944. A quarter of these are women, compared to less than 10% in 1939.
This alternate history isn't just the stuff of imagination. Historians have debated this provocative question for decades. Ian Kershaw, a renowned expert on Nazi Germany, once argued that Hitler's role was indispensable to the form the Third Reich took, but he also emphasized that the conditions of the time, the economic despair, national humiliation, and widespread anti-Semitism, would have likely produced some form of authoritarian regime regardless.
It's unbearable to think that the will of a single madman plunged Germany into the war.
Kershaw famously remarked, "It's unbearable to think that the will of a single madman plunges Germany into the war," suggesting that the societal forces at play could have enabled atrocities even without Hitler's leadership.
Fear of retribution by the Jews, whom they imagined were steering the Allied war effort, but also fear of what the regime itself would do to those who stepped out of line.
Richard Evans, another prominent historian, takes a slightly different view, proposing that Hitler's unique obsession with racial purity and expansionist policies drove the specific trajectory of Nazi Germany. However, he contends that Germany's desire to overturn the Treaty of Versailles and its post-World War I humiliation might have led to a militaristic regime under a different leader, though possibly less genocidal. Evans provocatively stated, "Without Hitler, Germany might still have sought war, but it is doubtful the Holocaust in its terrifying scale would have happened."
Listening to an account of what may be the single darkest chapter in the history.
These historians paint a chilling picture. A world without Hitler might have avoided the Holocaust and his unique brand of evil, but the societal fractures and prejudices of the time could have manifested in other terrifying ways. Technology and science, a world without war's accelerators. World War II gave us radar, jet engines, and of course the atomic bomb. But here's a chilling question. Does humanity stagnate without the war to push these advancements? Think about this. Many of the scientific minds who fled Nazi persecution, like Albert Einstein, contributed directly to Allied technological progress. Without Hitler's reign of terror, do these scientists stay in Europe? And if so, do we lose the Manhattan Project, the space race, even the internet, which traces its origins to wartime innovations? Would a world without Hitler have delayed humanity's leap into the modern age, leaving us decades behind where we are now? A different Cold War, or no Cold War at all? Without World War II, the global stage changes dramatically. The US and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers of the post-war era, might never have reached their dominant positions. Would this have avoided the Cold War altogether? Or would the power vacuum left by a less aggressive Germany have created an even more chaotic global struggle? Imagine a multipolar world. Britain clinging to its empire, Japan expanding unchecked in Asia, and the Soviet Union still looking westward. Does this create a world of smaller, fragmented wars instead of one great ideological battle? Or does the absence of Hitler leave the door open for someone even worse to rise? The final question, would the world be better without Hitler? Here's the truth. Hitler's absence doesn't guarantee peace or progress. It guarantees uncertainty. The forces that created him, economic despair, nationalist fervor, and deep-seated prejudices, would have still existed. History isn't a straight line. It's a series of choices, accidents, and individuals. Hitler's story is one of unimaginable horror, but also a reminder of how fragile our world can be. And as we imagine a world without him, we're left with one question. What does it take to stop the next Hitler before it's too late? Make sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.